Hey everyone, welcome to our review of the plant kingdom. Now, this slide looks very complicated, but we're going to break it down. First, focus on this square right here. Plants have certain traits that are different from animals and fungus and bacteria and protists and archaea. The plant kingdom has organisms that are autotrophs. That means they make their own energy. They do photosynthesis to make that energy. They are sessile, they cannot move. They have cell walls that are made of cellulose. They are multicellular, they're made up of many cells, and they are eukaryotic, they have complex cells. So, those are all some basic traits that apply to every organism in the plant kingdom. Now, all plants also have certain needs. They need sunlight in order to do their photosynthesis. They also need water to do photosynthesis and make their glucose sugar. They need certain minerals to maintain their cells. They need to do gas exchange. That means that for plants, they're actually taking in carbon dioxide, which they'll use in photosynthesis, and they're releasing oxygen, which is good because that's what we breathe in. They do reproduction. So, for reproduction, they actually have this special system. It's called alternation of generations. You can see that here. Within alternation of generations, there is what we call the sporophyte generation of plants. And that's when the plant is diploid. It has the full amount of DNA, and it's kind of like its adult form of plant. It's kind of growing, it's developed, it has spores, and then those spores get made into a gametophyte generation. And the gametophyte generation is where it does meiosis, and it has haploid cells. They have half the amount of DNA. It produces sperm and egg for the plant. When the sperm and egg get together and become fertilized, they can grow into the adult sporophyte, where then they can go through another meiosis and create sperm and egg during the gametophyte generation. And it kind of alternates back and forth between sporophyte and gametophyte generation in plants, but that's their reproductive system. So, again, reproduction happens through an alternation of generation pattern where sporophyte is diploid, full amount of DNA, kind of adult cells. Gametophyte is haploid, half the amount of DNA, making sperm and egg cells. Plants also are reliant on the movement of water, and some simple plants like bryophytes, they move water through diffusion, kind of like sponges did. But most plants actually have a vascular system that includes the ferns, the gymnosperms, and the angiosperms. They have a vascular system. What that means is they have different tubes within their plant bodies that allow them to move materials. Now, xylems move water. WXYZ is how the alphabet goes. That's how I remember that water is in the xylem. WX, water in the xylem. Now, the xylem moves water in through the roots, and that's due to root pressure, due to osmosis, actually, then up through the stem or the trunk of the plant, and that is due to a very important property of water that is called capillary action. It's the result of adhesion, where water sticks to the edge of the plant's stems or trunk, and then it moves water out through this process called transpiration, which is the evaporation of water through plant leaves. So xylems contain water, and they move that water in, up, and out of the plant. Phloem is a different type of nervous, or not nervous, but vascular system tissue, and phloems contain nutrients. So things like nitrogen that the plant needs in order to make its proteins. And they don't necessarily have to just go in, up, and out of the plant. They can move up and down within the plant depending on where they are needed. So if the roots need to make a lot of proteins and they need a lot of nitrogen, the nitrogen nutrient can move down in the phloem towards the root. But if the leaves need a lot of nitrogen to make nutrients, then the nitrogen can move up towards the leaves. So in the phloem, nutrients can move up or down. Now over here, you can actually see a cladogram. Remember, the clades are the different branches of the plant kingdom, and they're separated by these derived characteristics, like being plants. All of these four things are plants: bryophytes, ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. Now, bryophytes are the simplest plants. Those are things like mosses. They do not have seeds. They do not have a vascular system. When we get to this derived characteristic of a vascular system, we are able to include ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms in that category of having a vascular system. That means that they have xylem to move water and phloem to move nutrients. Next, we could talk about seeds as a derived characteristic. Now, ferns don't have seeds, they just have spores. They look like this. And after ferns becoming more advanced, we do get seeds, and that includes gymnosperms and angiosperms. Now, gymnosperm is a word that means naked seed, and angiosperm means an enclosed seed. So you can see another derived characteristic for angiosperms is that they have flowers or fruit. Angiosperms are the most complex type of plant in the plant kingdom. They have vascular systems, they have seeds, they have flowers, and they have fruit, most often in angiosperms. All right, let's break angiosperms down a little bit more because they are the most complex organism in the plant kingdom. If you look up here in the top corner, you can see there are different types of angiosperms. Woody versus herbaceous is a category we kind of talked about within angiosperms. So woody angiosperms are ones like vines, like grapevines and trees that produce wood. Herbaceous means that they have green stems. So most of the flowers that you would see in Walmart or Lowe's would have green stems. They would be considered herbaceous. Next, we have annuals, biennials, and perennials. Annuals complete their entire life cycle within 1 year, and they don't really come back. Biennials take 2 years to complete their life cycle. You can tell that because bi means two, like a bicycle has two wheels. Biennials take 2 years to complete their life cycle. And then perennials are the type of angiosperm plants that keep coming back year after year after year after year. So things like, for example, honeysuckle, those are a type of vine that if you have it in your yard, you've seen it come back year after year. And you continue seeing that over and over again. Last, we had monocots versus dicots. And when we dissected plants in class, you were actually able to look at a monocot example. Now, monocots have one cotyledon, that means one seed coat, whereas dicots have two. Monocots have leaves that have kind of straight parallel lines in them, whereas dicots have branchy leaves. Monocots tend to have vascular tissues like xylem and phloem that are really complex in their arrangement, whereas dicots have just like a circular formation of their xylem and phloem. Monocots have a fibrous root system. That means that their roots kind of spread all apart. If you've ever repotted a plant, you might have seen roots all over the place. You probably had a monocot, whereas dicots have a taproot. That's something like a thicker root in the middle with a little bit of branches off. Carrots and potatoes are really good examples of dicot taproots. And then the easiest way to tell the difference between a monocot and a dicot is that monocots have flower parts that are in multiples of three. So a lot of times, like in this picture, they'll have 6 petals. 6 is a multiple of 3, and that would tell you that it's a monocot. Dicots tend to have flowers in multiples of 4 or 5. Like in this picture, you can see there are 5 petals. That's a dicot. A couple other things to talk about with plant kingdom is that there are many different plant organs. You can see that here in this bottom gray box. There are roots, and those have the job of anchoring the plant into the ground and absorbing water and nutrients. The stems transport and produce and hold parts of the plant. So stems are the main ones that have xylem and phloem, but they also hold up the other parts of the plant towards the sun. The leaves are responsible for photosynthesis and transpiration. So, photosynthesis is making sugar, and transpiration means actually evaporation of water through the leaves. And then flowers are responsible for reproduction. Now, there is a difference between seed and pollen. Seed is when the pollen has gotten together with a plant egg and it actually starts to form a new plant. And pollen is just plant sperm. So right about now in the springtime, you can see a lot of pollen. That is the male reproductive part of a plant being released in the air. All right, last bit about plants. Plants are really cool because they are actually able to respond to their environment and to adapt. Phototrophism is one way they do that. That means growing towards the light. So if you see a plant and it's near a window, you might notice that plant grows towards the window. That's due to phototrophism. The plant wants to be able to reach the light. Gravitrophism means that the plants grow up against the force of gravity. So plants usually grow kind of up and down rather than sticking out to the side, even if you turn them over. Dormancy is basically what plants do when it is too cold or the conditions are not right for them to grow. They go dormant. Most seeds that you find in a grocery store or in Lowe's are dormant. They are not growing because it's not moist enough, it's not warm enough, it's just not the right conditions for growth. Plants are also able to adapt to many different types of environments, like water environments, aquatic environments, salty environments, desert, which is really dry, jungle. Many different types of environments will work for plants. They're just specially adapted to them. Some are even able to adapt to environments where there is not a lot of nutrition or nutrients like nitrogen in that environment. And those tend to be plants that live in bogs and places like swampy areas. They sometimes are carnivorous. So Venus flytraps are carnivorous and they're able to actually eat, if you will, an organism. What that means is that, for example, a fly might land in the Venus flytrap, and then the flytrap releases some chemical enzymes to break down that fly and get some of its nutrients. There are also parasitic plants that grow on other plants. That's a lot of times in the jungle. You'll have plants that grow up on top of other plants so that they can get the light instead of the plant, their host plant. There's also chemical defenses, so plants do not want to be eaten, it turns out. And so some of them do have chemical defenses, like poison ivy would keep an animal away from that type of plant. So plants are able to respond and adapt to their environment. Thanks so much for listening.